Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to another bone-chilling journey through the world of the unknown. If you're new here, make yourself comfortable, grab a warm drink, dim the lights, and prepare for a night of eerie tales and whispered legends. This channel is dedicated to exploring the most haunted places across the country, delving into the dark and mysterious histories that have left behind lingering presences. Tonight, we turn our attention to the grand estates and sprawling mansions of North America. Places where wealth, power, and tragedy have converged to create some of the most terrifying hauntings ever recorded. From the crumbling Gothic facades of Victorian-era manors to the opulent yet cursed halls of colonial estates, North America is home to countless mansions steeped in blood, betrayal, and unexplained phenomena. These are not just buildings, they are time capsules of sorrow, where the past refuses to be forgotten. Whether it's the ghostly figures that wander the corridors, the eerie whispers that echo through empty ballrooms, or the inexplicable sensations of being watched, these mansions have become infamous for their paranormal activity. Tonight, we will be diving deep into the most notorious haunted mansions across the continent, uncovering the chilling stories behind each one. From the infamous Whaley House in San Diego, where the echoes of a hanging still haunt the halls, to the cursed halls of Franklin Castle in Cleveland, where the tragic deaths of children have left behind a lingering malevolence, each location has its own unique and spine-tingling history. We'll also explore the eerie corridors of the Merchant's House Museum in New York, the phantom footsteps of the Villisca Axe Murder House, and the tragic legacy of the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana, where the spirits of the past refuse to rest. These are just a few of the many haunted mansions that make North America a land where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. As we journey through these haunted landmarks, we'll hear first-hand accounts from those who have experienced the unexplainable, witnesses who claim to have seen apparitions, heard voices from beyond the grave, and felt the chilling presence of unseen forces. We'll also examine the historical events that may have given rise to these hauntings, from tragic deaths to unsolved mysteries, and explore whether there is any truth to the rumors that these places are truly cursed. So, if you're ready to step into the shadows of North America's most haunted mansions and uncover the secrets hidden within their walls, press play and join us on this spine-chilling expedition. But be warned, once you enter this world of ghostly echoes and forgotten souls, you may never look at old homes the same way again. The Whaley House, a legacy of blood and sorrow among the many haunted mansions that dot the landscape of North America. Few are as deeply entrenched in history and tragedy as the Whaley House in San Diego, California. Built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley, a wealthy merchant and civic leader, the house was intended to be a symbol of prosperity and refinement. However, beneath its elegant facade lies a legacy of violence, despair, and the lingering presence of those who once lived and died within its walls. Thomas Whaley, the house's original owner, was a man of ambition and influence, but his life was far from idyllic. He had moved to San Diego during the Gold Rush era, hoping to build a fortune in the booming frontier town. His wife, Anna, was a woman of refinement and beauty, but her life was marked by tragedy. Before marrying Thomas, she had been married to a man named Cave Coates, with whom she had 2 children. Her first husband died under suspicious circumstances, and some whispered that she had played a role in his demise. Others believed she was simply a victim of fate, doomed to suffer misfortune wherever she went. The Whaley House itself became the site of one of the most infamous hauntings in American history. Before the house was even completed, a man named Yankee Jim Robinson was hanged for robbery on the very land where it would soon stand. His execution was a public spectacle, and his final moments were filled with curses and threats, vowing revenge from beyond the grave. Some believe that his spirit has never left, his hatred lingering in the air like a poison. But the tragedy did not end with Yankee Jim. The Whaley family endured their own share of sorrow, and their suffering only deepened the house's haunted reputation. Their oldest son, Francis, died of scarlet fever at the age of 2, his tiny body buried in the garden behind the house. Thomas and Anna's second child, Violet, survived into adulthood, but their youngest, Thomas Whaley Jr., died at just 4 years old. The loss of their children weighed heavily on the Whaleys, and Anna, in particular, became increasingly reclusive, retreating into the depths of the house as grief consumed her. then came the ultimate betrayal. In 1885, Thomas Whaley died of heart failure, leaving Anna alone in the home she had once shared with him. But her solitude was short-lived. Just 3 years later, Anna passed away as well, and her death was shrouded in mystery. Some claimed she had succumbed to natural causes, while others whispered that she had taken her own life, unable to escape the weight of her past. Whatever the truth, her death only added to the house's growing reputation as a place where the dead refused to rest. Over the years, the Whaley house became a magnet for the paranormal. Visitors and staff alike have reported strange occurrences: cold spots that appear without warning, the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and the unmistakable sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. Some claim to hear the faint laughter of a child, while others speak of the ghostly figure of a man in 19th-century attire, standing motionless at the foot of the grand staircase. The most chilling account, however, comes from those who claim to have seen Anna Whaley herself. Witnesses describe a tall, spectral woman dressed in Victorian mourning clothes, her face obscured by a veil of mist. Some say she stands by the window, staring out into the night, while others claim she lingers near the garden, where her children were laid to rest. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to the Whaley house, seeking answers to the unexplained phenomena that have made it one of the most haunted locations in the United States. Some believe the house is haunted by the spirits of the Whaley family, their sorrow and suffering too strong to be forgotten. Others suggest that the malevolent energy of Yankee Jim Robinson, whose final breath was drawn mere feet from the house's foundation, has tainted the land, ensuring that the Whaley house remains forever cursed. Whether the truth lies in history, folklore, or something far darker, one thing is certain: those who step inside may find themselves forever changed by the echoes of the past. The phantom child of the Whaley house. One of the most chilling and frequently reported phenomena associated with the Whaley house is the presence of the phantom child. Unlike the more defined apparitions of Thomas and Anna Whaley, the spirit of this young boy is often described as elusive, appearing in fleeting glimpses and vanishing the moment he is noticed. Witnesses claim to see a small boy dressed in 19th-century clothing wandering the upstairs hallways, his form flickering in and out of view as though he is caught between worlds. Some describe the child as a sad, silent figure, while others insist he is mischievous, playing with objects and hiding them in unexpected places. The origins of the phantom child's haunting remain shrouded in mystery, though many believe he is the spirit of Francis Whaley, the firstborn son of Thomas and Anna Whaley, who died of scarlet fever at the age of 2. According to historical records, Francis was laid to rest in the family plot behind the house, his tiny coffin buried alongside his younger brother, Thomas Jr., who died at just 4 years old. Some speculate that the two boys still play together in the afterlife, their spirits tethered to the home where they once lived. Others believe the phantom child may be the spirit of a servant's child who died in the house under tragic circumstances, his presence lingering in the rooms where he once played. Regardless of his identity, the phantom child's presence has been felt by countless visitors and staff over the years. Many describe an overwhelming sense of innocence and sorrow when encountering the child, as if they are witnessing the lingering grief of a boy who never got the chance to grow up. One particularly harrowing account comes from a tour guide who worked at the house in the 1980s. She described how, during one of her evening tours, a guest suddenly gasped and pointed toward the upstairs hallway. "Look at that little boy," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. When she turned to look, the hallway was empty, yet the guest swore he had seen a small child standing there, watching them with wide, unblinking eyes. Another chilling encounter was reported by a group of paranormal investigators who spent the night in the house in the early 2000s. As they explored the upstairs bedrooms, one investigator claimed to hear the faint sound of a child's laughter coming from an empty room. When he entered, the laughter stopped instantly, replaced by the sound of soft footsteps retreating down the hallway. He followed the sound, only to find himself standing in front of a closed door, one that had been locked from the inside. When he opened the door, the room was empty, but the air was thick with the scent of lavender, a fragrance Anna Whaley was known to wear. The Merchant's House Museum, a time capsule of tragedy and ghosts nestled in the heart of New York City's East Village, The Merchant's House Museum stands as one of the city's oldest surviving row houses, a rare glimpse into the life of a 19th-century affluent family. Built in 1832, the Federal-style home was the residence of the Treadwell family for nearly a century, preserving their belongings, furniture, and the atmosphere of their lives with meticulous detail. Yet, beneath its pristine woodwork and antique decor lies a darker legacy, one steeped in isolation, heartbreak, and the lingering presence of Gertrude Treadwell, the youngest daughter of the family, whose ghost is said to still roam the halls of her childhood home. Gertrude Treadwell's life was one of quiet devotion and emotional entanglement with the house she loved so deeply. Born in 1840, she was the youngest of 8 children raised in the opulent yet stifling environment of the Merchant's House. As a young woman, Gertrude was known for her delicate beauty and refined sensibilities, embodying the ideals of Victorian femininity. However, her life took a dramatic turn when she was jilted by her fiancé, a man from a prominent New York family. The heartbreak left her emotionally scarred, and she never married, instead dedicating herself to caring for her aging parents in the only home she had ever known. After the deaths of both her father and mother, Gertrude remained in the house alone, growing increasingly reclusive and obsessive about preserving the property exactly as it had been in her youth. She refused to allow any changes to the furniture, wallpaper, or even the placement of objects, as if by keeping the house untouched, she could somehow hold on to the people she had lost. Over time, her isolation deepened, and she became a near mythical figure in the neighborhood, a lonely old woman who lived in a house frozen in time. Some claimed she spoke to the portraits of her parents, as if expecting them to answer, while others whispered that she had become unhinged by grief, unable to move on from the tragedies that had shaped her life. When Gertrude died in 1933 at the age of 93, she left behind a house filled with her presence, a space where her love, sorrow, and longing had become deeply embedded in the very fabric of the walls. Since then, numerous reports have surfaced of strange occurrences within the Merchant's House, many of which seem to center around Gertrude's former bedroom, located on the 2nd floor. The room, meticulously preserved with her original bed, vanity, and personal effects, is said to be the site of intense paranormal activity. Some visitors have claimed to see the faint outline of a figure standing near the bed, while others report hearing the sound of someone moving about the room despite being completely alone. One of the most unsettling accounts comes from a tour guide who worked at the museum in the 1980s. One evening, as she was preparing to lock up, she noticed that Gertrude's bedroom door, which was always kept closed, was slightly ajar. Curious, she pushed it open, only to find the room in perfect order, yet something about it felt off. As she stepped inside, she was struck by an overwhelming sense of sadness, as though the air itself was thick with sorrow. Suddenly, she heard the unmistakable sound of a woman sighing softly, followed by the faint rustle of fabric, as if someone had just passed by. When she turned around, the room was empty, but the door had quietly shut behind her. She later admitted that she ran from the room, too frightened to investigate further. Another harrowing experience was reported by a group of schoolchildren who visited the museum on a field trip in the 1990s. While exploring the upstairs hallway, one student claimed to see a woman in a long, white dress standing at the top of the staircase. When he pointed her out to the others, they saw nothing, only an empty hallway bathed in the soft glow of the gaslight-style chandeliers. Moments later, the student reported feeling a cold hand brush against his shoulder, though no one else was near him. The teacher who accompanied the group later admitted that she had heard similar stories before, but had always dismissed them as the product of overactive imaginations, until that day. Despite the passage of time, Gertrude Treadwell's presence continues to be felt within the Merchant's House Museum. Whether she is truly trapped within its walls or merely a figment of collective belief, one thing remains certain: the house she loved so deeply still carries the weight of her sorrow, and those who step inside may find themselves forever changed by the echoes of her past. The phantom music of the Merchant's House beyond the visual and emotional hauntings associated with the Merchant's House Museum. One of the most unsettling and inexplicable phenomena is the occurrence of phantom music, strange melodies that seem to drift through the air without a discernible source. Visitors, tour guides, and paranormal investigators alike have described hearing faint strains of music, sometimes resembling old sea shanties, other times echoing the mournful tones of a violin or piano. These spectral tunes appear unexpectedly, often in sections of the house where no instruments or sound equipment are present, and vanish just as suddenly, leaving behind only an eerie silence. One of the earliest documented accounts of this phenomenon dates back to the 1950s, when a group of maintenance workers was repairing a collapsed section of wall. As they worked late into the night, they began to hear the faint sound of a violin playing in the distance. The melody was slow and melancholic, seemingly coming from one of the deeper chambers of the house. Thinking it was a fellow tourist with a hidden speaker, one worker called out, asking them to turn off the music. The melody stopped instantly, but when they cautiously explored the area, they found no sign of an instrument or any physical presence, only the cold, empty air and the lingering sense that something had been there and had only just vanished. Since then, numerous others have reported similar experiences. Some describe hearing the sound of a piano playing itself in the distance, its notes drifting through the corridors as if carried by an unseen breeze. Others speak of ghostly voices singing in hushed tones, their words just beyond comprehension. One particularly harrowing encounter was described by a tour guide who had been leading groups through the house for years. On a quiet evening, as she and a small group of visitors made their way through one of the older corridors, they suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of a violin playing a slow, mournful tune. Thinking it was a fellow tourist with a hidden speaker, she called out, asking them to turn off the music. The melody stopped instantly, but when she turned around, there was no one behind them. The group, visibly shaken, quickly ended the tour and left the house, their breath trembling as they tried to comprehend what they had just experienced. Paranormal investigators have attempted to document these mysterious sounds, setting up audio equipment in various sections of the house in hopes of capturing evidence. Some have recorded what they describe as unexplainable music, faint melodies that seem to move through the house without a source. Others claim to have captured recordings of multiple instruments playing at once, their harmonies eerily synchronized despite the absence of any visible musicians. Whether these sounds are the result of residual energy, a lingering presence, or simply the tricks of an ancient building settling in the night, one thing remains undeniable. Those who visit the Merchant's House Museum may find themselves forever haunted by the music of the past. The phantom footsteps of the Merchant's House. Among the many eerie occurrences reported in the Merchant's House Museum, none are as persistent or unsettling as the legend of the phantom footsteps. Unlike the more defined apparitions, such as the spectral figure of Gertrude Treadwell or the weeping presence of the phantom child, these footsteps seem to belong to an unseen force that wanders the house at all hours, leaving behind an inexplicable sense of being watched. Witnesses describe the sound of slow, deliberate steps echoing through the upstairs hallway, the rhythmic creak of the wooden floorboards betraying the presence of something, or someone, that should not be there. Some claim the footsteps grow louder the further one ventures into the house, while others insist they vanish the moment they are noticed, as if the entity is aware of being observed. One of the earliest documented accounts of these phantom footsteps dates back to the 1930s, shortly after the Treadwell family had vacated the house. At the time, a caretaker was hired to maintain the property, ensuring that the home remained in pristine condition. According to his journal, which was later discovered in the basement, the caretaker often heard the distinct sound of someone walking through the upstairs hallway late at night. Assuming it was a neighbor or an intruder, he would call out, only to be met with silence. On one particularly unnerving occasion, the footsteps grew louder and closer, eventually stopping just outside his bedroom door. When he opened it, there was no one there, only the lingering sound of footsteps retreating back down the hallway, growing fainter and fainter until they vanished completely. Since then, countless visitors and staff have reported hearing the same phenomenon. Some describe the sound of slow, measured steps, as though someone is pacing the upstairs hallway in deep thought. Others speak of sudden, hurried footfalls, as if someone is running through the house in a desperate attempt to escape an unseen force. The Villisca Axe Murder House, a night of terror that never ends. Among the many haunted mansions in North America, few are as deeply rooted in horror and tragedy as the Villisca Axe Murder House in Iowa. Unlike the lingering presences of lost children or the spectral echoes of the past, the Villisca house is a place where the sheer brutality of a single night has left behind an energy that refuses to fade. This is not just a house where ghosts are said to roam, it is a house where an unspeakable crime unfolded, leaving behind a legacy of fear, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of dread that still lingers today. The house was built in 1880 by Josiah Bassett, a respected businessman and local politician. He lived there with his wife, Sarah, and their 4 children, creating a seemingly idyllic family home. However, in June 1912, the Bassett family was away, leaving the house temporarily in the hands of their neighbors, the Moore family. John and Sarah Moore, along with their 4 children and 2 visiting relatives, spent the night in the Bassett home, unaware that they were about to become victims of one of the most horrifying crimes in American history. On the morning of June 10, 1912, the bodies of the Moore family were discovered in a scene of unimaginable carnage. All 10 occupants had been brutally bludgeoned to death with an axe, their bodies found in the upstairs bedrooms, their faces covered with towels, as if someone had tried to shield them from the horror of their own deaths. The youngest victim was just 2 years old, and the oldest was 55. Bloodstains covered the walls, and the house was eerily silent, as if the very air had been drained of sound. The killer, whoever they were, left no clear motive, no signs of forced entry, and no identifiable suspects. The only clue was a bloody handprint on the wall of the upstairs hallway, an eerie mark left behind by a murderer who was never found. Since that fateful night, the Villisca Axe murder house has been the subject of countless investigations, ghost hunts, and whispered legends. It is not just the crime itself that makes the house so terrifying, but the lingering presence of those who perished there. Visitors and paranormal investigators alike have reported an overwhelming sense of sorrow and terror the moment they step inside, as if the very air is thick with the memory of what happened. Many claim to hear the faint cries of children in the dead of night, their voices pleading for help that will never come. Others speak of the unmistakable sound of an axe striking wood, a phantom echo of the violence that once unfolded within its walls. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a group of paranormal investigators who spent the night in the house in the early 2000s. As they explored the upstairs hallway, their equipment captured what they describe as a sudden and inexplicable drop in temperature, accompanied by a sharp spike in electromagnetic activity. Then, one of the investigators reported hearing the faint sound of a child whispering his name, though no one else was present. When they played back the audio recordings later, they discovered something even more unsettling. The whispering was not just his name, but a distorted, garbled version of it, as if the voice had been filtered through something unnatural. Another harrowing encounter was described by a tour guide who worked at the house for several years. She claimed that every night, just after closing time, she would hear the faint sound of footsteps moving through the upstairs hallway. At first, she assumed it was the wind shifting through the old beams or the house settling with age. But as the nights passed, the footsteps grew louder, more deliberate. One evening, as she was locking up, she heard the unmistakable sound of a child sobbing softly from within the attic. Thinking it was a lost tourist or a prankster, she cautiously made her way upstairs, only to find the attic empty, the air thick with the scent of blood and decay, though no such odors should have been present. Despite decades of investigation and speculation, the identity of the Axe murder house's killer remains unknown. Some believe the house is haunted by the spirits of the Moore family, forever trapped in the moment of their final, horrifying night. Others suggest that the house holds the residual energy of the crime, replaying the trauma over and over in an endless loop. Whether the house is truly haunted or merely a place where history's darkest moments refuse to be forgotten, one thing is certain: those who dare to visit the Villisca Axe murder house will never forget the feeling of being watched, the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and the lingering sense that something unspeakable still lingers within its walls. The shadow figure of the Villisca Axe murder house. Among the many eerie occurrences reported at the Villisca Axe murder house, none are as unsettling as the legend of the shadow figure, a dark, featureless silhouette that appears without warning, only to vanish the moment it is noticed. Unlike the more traditional ghostly apparitions, such as the weeping child or the lingering presence of the Moore family, the shadow figure does not appear to be a specific person. Instead, it is described as a tall, gaunt figure, its form blending into the darkness, its presence an oppressive force that leaves those who witness it shaken to their core. The first documented encounter with the shadow figure dates back to the 1930s, when a local historian visited the house to conduct research on the infamous 1912 massacre. As he wandered through the upstairs hallway, he noticed an unusual figure standing at the far end of the corridor. The man described it as unnaturally tall, its posture rigid, its arms hanging limply at its sides. He claimed that the figure did not move, did not breathe, and seemed to absorb the light around it, making it impossible to discern any features. When he cautiously approached, the figure simply vanished, leaving behind only the lingering sensation that he had been watched by something that did not belong to this world. Since then, countless others have reported similar experiences. Some describe the shadow figure as standing motionless in the corners of empty rooms, its presence felt more than seeing. Others claim it follows them, appearing just out of the corner of their eye before disappearing when they turn to look directly at it. One particularly harrowing account comes from a group of paranormal investigators who visited the house in the early 2000s. As they explored the upstairs bedrooms, one investigator reported seeing the figure standing just outside the doorway of the master bedroom. He described it as having no discernible facial features, its head merely a void against the darkness. When he called out to the others, the figure vanished, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of dread that none of them could shake. Some believe that the shadow figure is the spirit of the unknown killer who committed the massacre, forever bound to the house by the weight of his crimes. Others suggest that it is the collective energy of the victims, a manifestation of the terror they felt in their final moments. Regardless of its origins, one thing remains certain: the Villisca Axe Murder House is more than just a historical landmark. It is a place where history's darkest night refuses to end, and where the past watches from the shadows, waiting to be remembered. The phantom screams of the Villisca Axe Murder House. Among the many unsettling experiences reported at the Villisca Axe Murder House, none are as deeply disturbing as the phenomenon of the phantom screams, ear-piercing cries that echo through the house at night, as if the victims of the 1912 massacre are still trapped in their final moments. Visitors, tour guides, and paranormal investigators alike have described the screams as guttural, desperate, and filled with unimaginable pain, their cries reverberating through the empty hallways long after the house has been locked for the night. One of the earliest documented accounts of these phantom screams comes from a group of caretakers who were hired in the 1950s to maintain the house after years of abandonment. They reported hearing the distant sound of a child crying late at night, the sobs growing louder and more frantic before abruptly cutting off, as if the child had been silenced mid-scream. Some of the caretakers claimed to hear the faint sound of an axe striking wood, followed by the muffled cries of a woman, only for the house to fall into an eerie silence afterward. These experiences left the caretakers deeply unsettled, with some refusing to work at the house after just a few nights. Since then, numerous others have reported hearing these phantom screams, often describing the same unsettling pattern: a child's cries, followed by a woman's desperate pleas, and finally, the sound of something heavy striking the floor, as if a body had just fallen. Some claim the screams are accompanied by the faint sound of an axe being dragged across the wooden floor, while others describe the overwhelming sensation of being watched, as though an unseen presence is reliving the horror of that fateful night. The cursed walls of the Villisca Axe Murder House. Beyond the phantom screams and the enigmatic shadow figure, another deeply unsettling phenomenon has been reported at the Villisca Axe Murder House: the sensation of being watched by the very walls themselves. Visitors and paranormal investigators alike have described an oppressive feeling that settles over them the moment they step inside, as if the house is not just a structure, but a living entity that remembers the horrors that transpired within its walls. Some claim that the air grows heavier the deeper they venture into the house, as though the past is pressing down on them, suffocating them in its sorrow and rage. Others describe the sensation of being followed, of an unseen presence lurking just out of sight, watching, waiting, and perhaps remembering. One of the most frequently reported experiences is the overwhelming sense of being observed by something unseen. Tour guides and researchers have described moments of extreme discomfort, feeling as though they are being judged by an invisible force that does not belong to this world. Some have claimed that the sensation is strongest in the upstairs bedrooms, where the Moore family met their gruesome end, the very air thick with the weight of their suffering. Others insist that the feeling of being watched is most intense in the hallway, where the bloodied handprint was discovered on the wall, a grim reminder of the night that changed the house forever. Another chilling aspect of the house's haunted reputation is the phenomenon of doors opening and closing on their own. Staff and visitors have reported hearing the faint creak of wood as doors swing open without warning, revealing nothing but empty hallways. Some doors slam shut with such force that they rattle the entire house, while others simply drift open as though moved by an unseen hand. One particularly harrowing account comes from a group of paranormal investigators who claimed to hear a door slam shut behind them as they explored the upstairs hallway. When they turned to investigate, they found the door locked from the inside, with no logical explanation for how it had closed so violently. The cursed walls of the Villisca Axe murder house beyond the phantom screams and the enigmatic shadow figure. Another deeply unsettling phenomenon has been reported at the Villisca Axe murder house: the sensation of being watched by the very walls themselves. Visitors and paranormal investigators alike have described an oppressive feeling that settles over them the moment they step inside, as if the house is not just a structure, but a living entity that remembers the horrors that transpired within its walls. Some claim that the air grows heavier the deeper they venture into the house, as though the past is pressing down on them, suffocating them in its sorrow and rage. Others describe the sensation of being followed, of an unseen presence lurking just out of sight, watching, waiting, and perhaps remembering. One of the most frequently reported experiences is the overwhelming sense of being observed by something unseen. Tour guides and researchers have described moments of extreme discomfort, feeling as though they are being judged by an invisible force that does not belong to this world. Some have claimed that the sensation is strongest in the upstairs bedrooms, where the Moore family met their gruesome end, the very air thick with the weight of their suffering. Others insist that the feeling of being watched is most intense in the hallway, where the bloodied handprint was discovered on the wall, a grim reminder of the night that changed the house forever. Another chilling aspect of the house's haunted reputation is the phenomenon of doors opening and closing on their own. Staff and visitors have reported hearing the faint creak of wood as doors swing open without warning, revealing nothing but empty hallways. Some doors slam shut with such force that they rattle the entire house, while others simply drift open as though moved by an unseen hand. One particularly harrowing account comes from a group of paranormal investigators who claimed to hear a door slam shut behind them as they explored the upstairs hallway. When they turned to investigate, they found the door locked from the inside, with no logical explanation for how it had closed so violently. The Merchant's House Museum, a symphony of spirits among the many haunting experiences reported at the Merchant's House Museum in New York. One of the most unsettling is the phenomenon of phantom music, strange, ethereal melodies that seem to drift through the air without a source. Unlike the more defined apparitions that have been seen in the house, the music appears unexpectedly, often in the dead of night, filling the empty rooms with an eerie, otherworldly presence that defies explanation. Some describe the sound of a piano playing itself in the distance, its notes drifting through the halls as if carried by an unseen breeze. Others speak of ghostly voices singing in hushed tones, their words just beyond comprehension. But perhaps the most chilling account comes from a group of historians who visited the house in the 1980s, only to hear a violin playing a slow, mournful tune in the middle of the night, its melody growing louder and more intense before abruptly stopping, leaving behind an oppressive silence that sent shivers down their spines. One of the earliest documented accounts of this phenomenon dates back to the 1930s. Shortly after Gertrude Treadwell's death, a caretaker who had been hired to maintain the house reported hearing the distinct sound of a violin playing in the dead of night. At first, he assumed it was a neighbor practicing in the early hours, but when he stepped outside, the music continued, its source nowhere to be found. The next night, he set up a phonograph in the hallway, hoping to capture the sound and prove that he was not imagining things. When he played back the recording the next morning, he discovered something that defied logic. The violin had been playing the same melody over and over, but the recording also captured something else, something that made his blood run cold. Intermittently layered beneath the music were faint, distorted voices, whispers that seemed to be pleading for help, their words garbled but unmistakably desperate. The caretaker, unnerved by what he had captured, resigned from his position shortly after and refused to speak of the experience again. As we bring this journey through North America's most haunted mansions to a close, one thing remains abundantly clear. These houses are more than just decaying relics of history. They are places where the past refuses to stay buried. From the blood-soaked floors of the Villisca Axe murder house to the sorrowful echoes of Gertrude Treadwell at the Merchant's House Museum, from the phantom choir that haunts the Merchant's House to the unrelenting presence of the shadow figure that lingers in the Villisca Axe murder house, each of these mansions tells a story that transcends time, a tale of tragedy, sorrow, and the unshakable feeling that some souls are never meant to leave the homes they once lived in. If you enjoyed this journey through North America's most haunted mansions, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever encountered something unexplainable in a historic home or another haunted location? What other haunted mansions would you like to see explored in future episodes? Your curiosity fuels this channel, and I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, sometimes the past isn't as far behind us as we think. Thank you for watching, and may your own journeys through history be filled with wonder, mystery, and just the right amount of eerie anticipation. Good night, and sweet dreams, if you dare.